All right, welcome everybody to Getting Stellar Letters of Recommendation. This is the first workshop in a series of 2 workshops to help students better prepare for their applications for the CSUMB General Scholarship. The CSUMB General Scholarship is available to all students, whether you're a first-time freshman, whether you're a transfer student, whether this is your very first semester, or whether you've been at CSUMB a while. We want students to apply for scholarships, and we also want them to be extremely prepared when they do that so that they can submit a competitive application to make sure that they're eligible to get all the award that they deserve. And so that's really important that we're doing this support for you all, because it's my understanding that more students than ever are applying for scholarships, which means that there's a whole bunch of people out there competing for the same pot of support for scholarships. And so the best way to make sure that you are submitting a competitive application is to get the information that we're going to provide here today, and you're going to be set up in a good way. So a reminder that the scholarship application is due February 18th. So that's not too long here. So the things that you're going to, the information you're going to get here today, and then at the companion workshop tomorrow, is going to be information that you're going to want to act on immediately. And so without further ado, I want to make sure that I introduce, or let the people who are going to provide us the information today to introduce themselves. I would just say that we have Ananda Warren here from the Cooperative Learning Center, and Natasha Ullman from the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Center. And then we also have Brendan, who's from the CLC as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them. They're going to introduce themselves and then get started with the presentation.
Thanks, Jacinto. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or good evening, wherever you're coming from in this wide world. Natasha Ullman, coming to you from undergraduate research here on the 2nd floor of the library, and I'm happy to be here. So I'm going to toss it over to the co-facilitators here.
And I'm Nanda Warren, and I work just down the hall from Natasha, also on the 2nd floor of the library in the Cooperative Learning Center. And if you haven't been here before, it's where you can come for all kinds of collaborative learning, peer tutoring, study groups, things like that for many, many classes. So if you haven't been here, please stop by and ask about our schedules. We're starting up on Monday with tutoring. And we have here one of our writing tutors, Brendan. Do you want to introduce yourself, Brendan?
I'm Brendan. I'm a 4th year here at CSUMB, but I graduate in the fall, and I'm a writing tutor for the Cooperative Learning Center.
Sorry, Nanda, I'm trying to look at my screen. I've got like, there we go.
There we go. I'll make the call to move on to invite the participants to tell us what is one question that you might have that you want to have answered by the end of the session, and we'll make sure to address that. And you can type it into the chat or unmute, whatever you're comfortable with.
I think my biggest thing is just finding the right people to get letters of recommendation from. I already get nervous to ask anyways, but then just like making sure I find the people that will give me like the best like words, like, or, you know what I mean, like the best options that I have in general, and then also figuring out how to ask.
That's great, Molly. Thanks for starting us off and sharing. I think what we've really heard is kind of a popular concern, right? Like, okay, who do I get to write me a strong letter? Which is fantastic. You're thinking about that because that's what you want. You just don't want a letter. You want a strong letter, or the best letter, right, as you put it. And then certainly, you know, how to ask. And so we're going to actually cover how to ask. We have a template actually to share with you. So great. Thank you, Molly. Yeah, and thanks, Vignesh, for your contribution in the chat about not a question as much as just want to improve. And so, yeah, we're going to share some tips actually and strategies on what you want to think about when you're asking for letter writers. Coming from the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Center, we work with many, many students inside of undergraduate research to really make sure that they are going on to graduate school, if that's a choice that they want, to pursue graduate studies after research, after getting a bachelor's degree. And so a lot of times they have to ask a lot of letters of recommendation. So that's a very popular kind of thing. So we have a lot of tips to share today. So we're going to kind of move on and share those tips with you. Sorry, Nanda, I keep losing my screen. So there we go. It's being really finicky right now. So a couple things we're going to do at the end by the end of our session today is to identify possible 3 letters of recommendation. We have a system that we'd like to share with you that is really helpful in terms of identifying, again, going back to Molly's point about who are the best letters of recommendation and why should I choose them. So we're going to actually have you do some work on that on your own to start thinking about, like, who are these folks I want to ask and why am I asking them? You're going to draft a personal attributes actually list that's going to help aid in that first bullet. That's actually something you're going to do. And then you're going to generate the ask email. And this is again, going back to Molly's really good question about, like, how to ask and what should I put in my email? Should I email? Should I, what are the protocols in place? And then a plan for next steps. So what is the letter of recommendation? It's, we love pulling from Wikipedia because the Wikipedia has a lot of really great information. So we cited that because, the letter of recommendation really assesses you as a applicant. You're asking somebody to write on behalf of you, right? And so those qualities, characteristics, and capabilities, that's what you're asking the letter writers to write about. But at the same time, as you're asking them to write about you, you want to actually make sure you're in charge of the process and helping the letter writers write the best things or the things you want them to write about. So that is not to say that I'm saying that you should write the letter of recommendation. I'm actually opposed to that for a lot of reasons, but rather that you guide the letter writer as best as you can to say, you know what, I'm applying for the CSUMB scholarship. It's asking for these kinds of things. You've been a faculty, a professor of mine. We've worked in this kind of way together. You've seen me in class. You've seen me do my group project. Whatever it is that you actually want them to focus on, that's your job to kind of help bring that out so they know exactly what to focus on. And so you're actually helping them see what you want them to focus on. So that's a really, really important part. So the letter of recommendation, as you're going to learn and you're going to sort of see throughout our presentation here, we're really giving you strategies and tips for you to actually help your letter writers. They know how to write letters, but they're writing lots of letters, right? They have a lot of students. So we find that whenever you sort of work with the writers to give them particular evidence and to actually ask them specific things on what to write, letter writers, hands down, what we hear, they're very appreciative. Because they're like, you know what, I'm going to get started on your letter right away because you've helped me sort of, with the information, and I know exactly what it is you want me to write about. So why do you need a good one? Because it predicts success. And it assesses risk as well. So how much, for example, the scholarship, money that Jacinto was just talking about, there are a lot of applicants. And so why should you get the funding? So it's always sort of a thinking about the risk, right? The risk that the foundation or the people who are given the money are taking. And so they're looking at those letters to see, like, what do other people say about you? What do people who are professionals, like academics, say about you? What do people who are professionals in your field say about you if you've been in a workforce, for example? It rounds out your application as well. So, for example, you're going to have a statement, right, that the CSUMB scholarship asks for a personal statement, and then the letter writer should complement that personal statement. So it really rounds out the cornerstone of your application. I do want to make a note, in talking with some committees, sometimes they actually read the letters first. So they actually actually go into the application and say, you know what, before I get into the personal statement of the applicant, I want to see what the faculty are saying, or I want to see what those letters are saying, because that'll help sort of start the conversation about like what it is that they should look for as they look at through your own documents that you've submitted. 5 core steps. Nanda, is this is me, or I always
We can do either way. I'm happy to pick it up from here.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So we're going to go step by step. And I think I do really appreciate Molly's questions, because you can see that's part of our plan here, is first starting with who do you ask? That's the first step, and then you contact them. Then there is some follow-up. So we'll talk about how to prepare your reference writers once they have said, yes, I will write you a strong letter, what to do, and then how and when and maybe how often to check in and make sure they're actually going to get it in on time. So again, as Natasha was saying, that you're controlling the process all the way throughout. And then not to forget the last step, to give thanks. Once you've got that letter, you want to make sure to circle back and thank them and let them know that you got this wonderful scholarship because of their support. It's super meaningful. So let's start with step 1. So how do we select the reference writers? What are some things that you want to think about? So it really depends on the application. So, you know, you might have your absolute wonderful favorite letter writers who supported you in something, and they wrote you some great letters, and you might think like, okay, I'm just going to always rely on those 2 people forever because they love me and they know me. But for each thing that you apply for, you should really assess like who would be the strongest letter writer for this particular opportunity. So an example is, you know, if you, you know, recently, you know, transferred to CSUMB, you know, last semester, and you love your community college instructors, but you also maybe have a CSUMB instructor who knows you now, that might be a good person to pull in as a new letter writer, in addition to the ones that you've asked before. So kind of keep updating them. Maybe you're applying for an internship, and so you need a more professional, someone who knows you in a professional capacity, or maybe you're applying for a more academic scholarship and you really need that professor. So you want to kind of tailor it to what it is that you're applying for. So of course, the relationship is really important. You want someone that you're comfortable approaching, but I wouldn't rely only on the relationship, like the relationship plus what do they know about you and what can they speak to? And that's actually the first exercise that we're going to do. We should have mentioned before, this is actually a hands-on thing. So if you haven't, if you don't already, take a minute to look around you and see if you have a pen and paper that you can write on, because we're going to have you do a little writing exercise right now. To sort of brainstorm who would be the best person to sort of round out my application. Because you want people who not only are appropriate for what you're applying for and you have a good relationship with, but also people who have an understanding of who you are and what qualities or attributes you can talk about. So this is what I'd like you to sketch out in your notebook. And we're asking you to brainstorm for 3. The CSUMB scholarship, I believe, Natasha and Jacinto, can you remind me, does it ask for 2? It asks for 2, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it asks for 2, but it's not a bad idea to have 3 in mind in case somebody backs out or says they can't do it in the amount of time that you're proposing. So in your notebook, you sketch out a little table. Across the top, you're going to put 3 possible names. And down the side, you're going to put some attributes that you want them to emphasize. So what do we mean by attributes? Let's talk about that first before you start writing. So what do we mean by attributes? You can type this into the chat. Or unmute and just say it. If I'm saying this applicant, I'm on the committee and I'm saying this applicant has all the attributes of a top student, what are some words that come to mind that might describe that really strong student? How would you describe them? Leadership skills. Thank you. Dedicated. right? And maybe specifically dedicated to a particular subject or field of study. Dedicated again, great. Good work ethic. Good time management.
That's a tough one.
Organized. Yeah, so expert in the skills learned in the coursework, right? So, you know, if you're highlighting a specific expertise that and maybe in your personal statement, you're emphasizing that you're pretty far along in your program and you've really gained a lot of knowledge. You want someone who can corroborate that. Good. Creative, innovative. Yeah, absolutely. These are great ideas. Brendan or Natasha, do you have anything to add that you want to throw in there?
I feel like that covered it quite a bit, but I definitely organization and time management, because those are very, 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 it is very easy to get swamped by those two things.
And to go back to Natasha's point, if a letter is predicting success for the student, you know, that's something that predicts success. Like this person is really well organized and is able to balance a lot of things in their lives. Natasha, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
I was just going to work as a strategy. So it's really good to, in this activity, what we're doing is to think about things that are great. But if you feel like you have evidence that you want to showcase, then you can start with the evidence. For example, if you're like, wow, I got an A on that team project and I really want to showcase that, you might be like, okay, what attributes are those? Collaboration, leadership. You know, so you start backwards a little bit. You know, you can start it both ways. You can be like, this is the thing I really want my faculty to talk about because the evidence is really important. So there's two ways to kind of go about this. I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So you can think about what you're involved in around campus, and then what does that show about you? What are the qualities that you bring to those experiences, or that those things have helped you develop? Great idea. So let's go back. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Let's go back to your table then. And here's an example, and you can make your own. We'll give you a couple minutes to brainstorm some ideas. So let's say that the attributes you want to emphasize are that you're collaborative, you're creative, you're curious, and you're a leader. That's how you want to present yourself to the scholarship committee. So then you think about your different letter writers and what evidence could they talk about in their letter that would support that claim that that's your attribute. So maybe, you know, Professor Sanchez knows that I'm collaborative because I worked in their research lab, and Professor Garcia knows this great work I did on our group project. And so what's going into the middle of your table is the evidence, right? So again, like Natasha was just saying, you could work from the inside out and think like, oh, here's a really neat thing that I did. I'm going to mention this in my personal statement. Who could I ask to talk about that? And that's the letter writer. And what's the quality that I want them to emphasize in their letter? So you're generating the evidence for the letter writer, and you'll be able to share that with them. It makes their job much easier. This kind of planning can also help you write your personal statement, right? Because the two should align. Your letters and your personal statement should be kind of going in the same direction and telling a similar story. So the brainstorming that you do here will also help you with your personal statement. Let's just take a minute to kind of sketch some things out, and then we'll ask you, you know, if you thought of anything came to your mind, if you'd like to share. Let's take like 1 minute to just sketch some notes. So I know that wasn't very much time, but did anyone come up with some ideas of maybe some attributes that you want to emphasize about yourself? Or did you think of some evidence that might relate to a particular person you might ask?
Oh, Vignesh actually had a question. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
great. Thank you.
She was asking where can I access the recording for this, because I have a class now, so she's gonna have to leave.
Oh, yeah, I understand. Yeah, good question. That's a question for Jacinto. Where can they access the recording later?
So what I'll do is after this is all finished and it's been uploaded to our YouTube channel for the Transfer Student Success Center, I'll send out the link to the video to everybody who is registered through MyRaft. So make sure that you register for this if you didn't already register for it in MyRaft, and I'll send it out through that list.
Great, thank you. And thank you for coming to part of it. It was wonderful to have you. So any ahas as you were sketching things out? Did this make you think of anybody that you might ask, or perhaps some details you might include? Yeah, go ahead, Berenice.
Oh, hi. This is a great, like really good to put it out there, organized. It really helped me right now when I was looking at it, having the attributes and then like the evidence space in the middle. So something I would want to highlight for myself would be being collaborative. And I can ask one of my professors and they can look back and see that we did a lot of group projects throughout the semester, and every single one of them, my team did really well. And it's not because I was a part of the team, but maybe it was. And I could show her that she kind of saw it herself, the way that I would reach out to my teammates and kind of keep us on track when it came to the project. So I would specifically ask that professor to help me highlight that attribute about myself.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. That's the idea, right? So it gives you some ideas that you can kind of prompt them with to help them remember those things. And it does direct you towards people that you can ask sometimes that you wouldn't have thought of before. Great, thank you. Yeah, it's funny, funny story. One time we were doing this workshop, a participant was doing this exercise and they said, actually you, Nanda, would be a really good person to ask, because they came to the CLC a lot to do tutoring. And so I knew them quite well from their work. And so they asked me and I wrote him a letter, and it was a good fit. And I wouldn't have necessarily thought that if he hadn't come to me and said, well, you know that you've seen that I do X, Y, Z. And then I was like, yeah, you're right, I have. So it can actually help you get to yes. And yes, I see one in the chat as well. So you said you were going to ask your business professor for a reference letter, because they can highlight your leadership and public speaking skills. Exactly. So you really think about like, okay, not just the professor I like, but the professor who really has seen these things. It's a good way to kind of shift your thinking sometimes. Great, thank you for that participation. Yeah, Brendan, absolutely. Business professors, very good people to ask for those type of skills.
And I like also just to add, you know, that these are professionals in the field that you're asking. So the one thing that you want to stay away from is any like friends or relatives, you know, parents, guardians, you know, people who know you personally. You want to aim for professionally. So I think that's the vibe we're getting here with all of your responses. And I just want to say, yes, that's exactly the kind of where you want to be with your thinking.
So there are other ways to kind of organize your notes as you're preparing. And tomorrow at the same time, we're giving a workshop on writing the personal statement. And it's great to again, think about your whole application as one piece and aligning the different pieces. So another way to brainstorm both for your personal statement and for your letters of recommendation is just to use a simple 3-column organizer where you list all of the experiences that you've done that you think are pretty cool, you want to highlight. What are the skills, qualities, attributes that maybe came out of those experiences, and then who could give evidence of those things? And so this is just another way that you could maybe brainstorm some things for both aspects of your application. So once you have an idea of maybe 3 people that you could ask, you want to reach out to them, right? So we often have a lot of questions about, how to reach out in person, by email, when do I reach out, things like that. So we want to talk about that. And as you have questions, please ask them. So you do want to give them plenty of time. And so we said here at least a month. Well, now when is the CSUMB scholarship due? Does anyone know?
February 18th, I believe.
Right, February 18th. Does that sound right? I should have it by heart. Yeah, February 18th. I'm looking at the website. Right, so that's actually less than a month. So you should kind of figure this out like today. Well, this week, right? I would say sometime this week, try to reach out to those folks so that they have enough time. And certainly you don't want to be reaching out to them like a week before, because that's very risky that they might not have time to do it. So if you're in a class with someone now and you want to talk to them after class, or you want to go to their office hours and talk, that's great. I mean, in person, if you're comfortable doing that, that's wonderful. If you do that and they say, oh yeah, I'd love to do that for you, I would definitely follow up with an email, just to make sure that they remember and that you're able to kind of lay out a little more detail about what it is you're applying for, when it's due, and other things that you want to communicate to them. So in person is great, but a follow-up email is good. You could also, of course, reach out by email if it's somebody that you had in a past semester, or someone who was your supervisor a little while ago and you're not working there right now. So the email should be formal, not too long, and it should ask to write a strong letter. So not just could you write me a letter, but could you write me a strong letter? So that, because you really want an honest answer. You don't want like, yeah, I can write you a letter, but maybe it's not going to be the best letter. So that's a word that we recommend including in that email. And we'll break it down a little bit what the parts are. Yeah, so let's break it down. So this is a template, and don't worry about copying it all down. We actually do have a Google Doc handout that we're going to share the link with you in just a minute, and we'll have this. So if you want to save it, you can. So what are some things that we are recommending that you include? So it should be formal, but it should be brief. Think about your audience. If you are writing to your professors, right now, it's the first week of classes, they have 1,000 things on their mind. So they don't want to read like a really long email. They want something that's going to get right to the point, but also, is speaking to them personally. We do not recommend that you send one email out to everyone at the same time with like CC or BCC. Don't do that, right? You want it to be individualized, crafted for that particular person. So however you normally address them, if they usually call them Professor Garcia, you would say that, whatever, your relationship is, you would use that. And then we recommend in the first line, making some kind of connection to what is your relationship, how do they know you? So if you were in their class last semester, you would start with that. So dear Professor Garcia, I really enjoyed your class last semester on whatever. So just like, just in case they don't immediately connect your name with who you were, make sure you get that reference in. So that will help them remember. And then the second line, getting right to the point, I am applying to, and then tell them what you're applying for, and then make the ask. So I'm writing to ask if you can write me a strong letter that speaks to my, now, what do you think that X, Y, and Z is? What are we going to put there? Exactly, Bernice. It's the attributes. So that brainstorming that you've done, now you're going to use that in your letter. So that is helpful because, again, sometimes someone might ask you, someone might ask me for a letter of recommendation, and I'm not sure that I'm the right person to ask. Sometimes I'll have a former tutor who worked for me as a tutor applying for their science grad school program, and my initial response is like, oh, I'm not sure I'm the best person. I wasn't your environmental science professor. But if they ask me if I could write a letter that speaks to their leadership ability, interpersonal skills, and collaborative skills, I could say, oh yeah, of course, I could do that. So you're sort of signaling to them what you think they can offer, and it really helps them say yes to the ask. The final sentence there is super important. What's the deadline? And if you want to back up the deadline just a little bit, like here it says February 12th, it's not a bad idea. So, you don't want people writing at the very last minute. So you can kind of set your own personal deadline that's, maybe a couple days before, just to, reduce anxiety for everyone. So that is something you can do. And then of course, a thank you. And then there can be follow-up. Yeah, Natasha, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to just suggest what Nanda just said, and just to follow up with the idea of the deadline. So just making sure that you also give at least the writers at least 2 weeks, right? So we talked a little bit about that tight timeline we're on, but give the writers, if you are on a tight timeline, give the writer like the benefit, right? Of like pushing into like enough time to write a strong letter of recommendation.
Yes, very, very important, especially right now, because we have this kind of narrow window that we're working with, a little bit less than a month before the application is due. So, if you were to write to them, at the end of this week, give them at least 2 full weeks to work on it. So I will put this link in the chat right now, and I'll just hand it off to Natasha to kind of go into what you do after you get the yes. So I will share that email with you. So don't worry if you didn't write it all down.
Cool, thanks, Nanda. Yeah, all these tips are so important. Any questions on step 1 and 2 so far before we jump into 3, 4, and 5? Any questions or any areas you need clarification on? Okay. So preparing your reference writer, and again, if you need clarification, you can always, stop me from chatting. So preparing your reference writer is really important. And we talked about that, right? Like it's all going to come back to those attributes that we talked about, that Nanda talked about just now. You're going to see that those attributes, once you do that activity and you really identify those attributes for yourself, you're going to be able to use that in multiple ways in this letter writing process. So here's another thing you're going to do with those attributes. You're going to prepare the reference writers by giving them all the necessary program information details or scholarship information details. So in this case, what is the scholarship? You may want to send a link to them. We put a link in the chat there, just to let them know what it is, right? You may want to copy and paste some select information from there. For example, anything about the letters of recommendation or the prompt or anything else like that. You may want to also give them a draft of your personal statement. And I say draft because the statements sometimes get worked on all the way until the very end. But if you can give them sort of a draft or sort of a bulleted list, that'll be fine. But you really want to think about preparing your writers to give you actually a strong letter. And I think that's going to be really important. You also want to be ready for questions to you from the letter writer. For example, whenever I get a request for letters of recommendation, I immediately write back, I would like to, however, I want to know, why do you think I'm the best person? So I actually want some information from the letter writers first, unless they provide me with the attributes like we've been talking about, that they're like, here's why I'd like you to write for me. Then I'm much more like, oh, they're giving me information. That's great. So let's go to the next, and then we'll show you some samples of how you could prepare your letter writers and actually how you can formulate those particular points.
Actually, can I add just one more thing that's specific to the CSUMB scholarship? And it also applies to some other applications as well, but we know this is true for the CSUMB scholarship. Once they have said yes, you can actually put those people's names and email addresses into the application and save it. You're not going to submit the application yet because you still need to get all your other materials together. But on the CSUMB scholarship page, you can go into the apply now, you can start filling that in, put in your letter writers, and then save it. And then the system will actually auto-generate some reminders to them. Also, once they're ready, they have a place to submit it. So like before the break, actually, a student told me that they had asked someone for a letter and they said yes, but then the professor was like, but wait, I don't have anywhere to send it. Oh, I can't do this right now. And then it was like, all slipping away, because that professor like really needed to like get this off their to-do list. And so they needed somewhere to submit it. And so she thought that she had to like finish the application first and then put in the name, but it's not like that. Like go ahead and put in the name, save it, and then you can go in and finish your application, submit it later, if that makes sense.
Such an important detail, Nanda. So here are some sample like template language. You can sort of, and feel free and take a picture of this if you'd like. You can certainly look back at the recording that Jacinta will post. But this is going back to the evidence, right? So for example, if, and you see that those bolded terms are actually the attributes, right? So primary leadership in the first bullet and work independently in that second bullet. But it's not just the terms, right? You just don't ask them, hey, I'd like you to show how I, took a primary leadership role. They're not going to know what that means because you have a particular idea in your mind and they may not have that idea, right? So you actually want to help them remember and recall that idea. So I took a primary leadership role in a team project, getting the group to work together to complete the project that earned us an A. And Bernita, you actually said earlier that it sounded like from your comment, you have several group projects you worked on. So I would say that, right? Like I've worked on multiple or several or two or three, quantify it. And so it actually, it's much more powerful because it shows your complexity in which you actually can work. My ability to work independently. So again, it's not just I work independent, but at my service learning site, or placement at Return of the Natives, by taking initiative, there's another bolded attribute, on internal projects and completing these projects before the deadline. So the writers need that kind of special detail to help them go, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yes, that applicant was great at doing X, Y, and Z. So, push into those details. Those details are really important. And, that's why we have the CLC staff here too, because working with the CLC staff, they can really help you, right? Like push into those and to remind you to recall those really specific details that are very important.
And
yeah.
So do we want to pause here and take a few minutes to write some emails? We can also ask the participants, do you want to try drafting something right now? And then what we could do is if you want to check it with one of us, we can do a little breakout activity. Just let us know. Do you want a little bit of writing time? Well, let's go into the next steps and then we'll ask you again. So that just know that we're here, and that's also why Brendan is here too. So if you want to, and that is why we always invite the tutors. If you would like some feedback before you hit send on an email, the writing tutors are available to help out with that. Just to see, like, did I get the tone right? Does this sound okay? Do you think this is specific enough? So that's something that we can do. So just keep that in your mind. We'll go through the next steps and then we'll ask you again if you want to check an email with us.
Step 4, the check-in. So oftentimes the check-in is a question, right? Like, I'd like to check in with my letter writers, but I'm nervous. I don't want to bug them. These are the things we've heard come up, right? I don't want to bother them. They're faculty. I don't want to, but as a letter writer, we love those reminders. I just worked with a student on a letter of recommendation for graduate school, and she had close to about 13, 14, I lost count at one point, but 14 graduate schools. So you can imagine the amount of deadlines. And I had a beautiful list, right? But she emailed me and was like, just a reminder, this one's due here, this one's, and I was like, thank you so much. Because we have a lot on our plates, as we all do, right? And so checking in with your letter writers are really important. It's a relationship. If they've said yes to your letter and they've committed to doing that, then you're absolutely follow through, and just a nice little reminder. Hi, just a reminder, my application is due on this date, or my letter writer, my letter is due on this date. We love it. As spoken as a letter writer, love the reminders. So don't shy away from that. That's very important, and it's part of the process. It's part of this whole entire thing that we're talking about here. You're not bugging your letter writer when you do send those reminders. And lastly, we're just going to talk about giving thanks. We're going to talk about giving thanks because that's very important. Sometimes, we forget, or we thank the people in our head. We're like, oh, that was so great that my faculty was able to give me a letter of recommendation. That's fantastic. They're great. They're wonderful. And we do all this thinking in our head, but we don't actually connect with the letter writer to say thank you. So thanking them right away. So if they've submitted their letter, and usually you'll get a little automated ping now that will say like, so and so submitted your letter. So that's wonderful. And then you can send an email and say, thank you, I see that you submitted the letter. Thank you so much for supporting me. And then it goes even one step further, because again, this is about relationship building. So you want to send future updates. So when you do get that scholarship, not if, but when, right? We want to think positive. When you do get that scholarship and the letter writer has played a role in helping you get that, then you want to send a quick little email, status update. Guess what? I got that scholarship. Thank you so much again for taking the time to write me a letter of recommendation. So they love to hear from you. It's like I said, it's about relationship building. They're supporting you in this endeavor. They're making this happen for you. So they're part of your crew. They're part of your team now. So don't forget about them. And also, if you ever want to call on them again in the future, that's always a wonderful relationship and a contact to have. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so as we wrap up here, I saw that Bernice put in the chat before she ran off to class that she'd definitely follow up with the CLC if needed. And I definitely encourage you to do that. If not for the email, because you're like, no, I got the email, I got that part down, then certainly for the personal statement, I think it's great to get feedback on that. So we do have another workshop tomorrow at the same time. That's on the personal statement, and we'll have tutors there as well to kind of help you brainstorm. But we encourage you to check out our website, csumb.edu/CLC. And if you add in the tutoring there, then you'll get also a list of the drop-in times and more little details about writing tutoring in particular. But tutoring starts on Monday, so you can come and see us anytime. You can also just stop by the library second floor and ask about our tutoring, writing tutoring appointments, and we'll get you in.
Awesome. And if you have any questions about undergraduate research, maybe you said, well, she said undergraduate research, what is that? Feel free and contact me. We are again on the second floor of the library, right down the hall from the CLC. We work with a lot of folks who actually want to get those hands-on undergraduate research experiences in their different fields, biology, psychology, mathematics, to get those experiences for their career or graduate school or whatever's coming next after you graduate. So we're happy to talk with you about that. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. And Jacinto, thanks for inviting us.
Yes, thank you, CLC and UROC folks. It's always an amazing time when we get together to support all students, especially transfer students. Make sure you attend that other companion event. Make sure you tell your friends about it. Again, everybody who registered through MyRaft will get a link to this recording. And just make sure that you stay as engaged as possible with all the different support. 4 people now from different areas of campus that if you go in there and you see them say hi, right, it makes that accessing and risk-taking in terms of seeking resources a little bit less daunting. We're here to help, and we just want to make sure that you all are prepared and as ready as you can be for success. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow for part 2. Bye everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Ah, just you and me.
I'm gonna click the recording off.